Hi. I just wanted to bring what I thought about the Syrian war. Obviously, my knowledge is limited, but I do believe that we all have something to contribute, and maybe something might be gained out of what I say, which is based a little bit on what an MEP brought to the discussion last weekend at the beginning of September, with regard to the war and the President Assad and the possible peace that could be, might be brought about there. He did mention that perhaps it's a case that we should consider speaking to President Assad with regard to a peace, and I too have been thinking along those lines, because everybody's saying that we shouldn't discuss anything with President Assad, but the situation is that there is a degree of peace in parts of Syria, those who support him, and there are Syrians that support him. Obviously, the divisions there are partly due to the religious side of it. Some are Sunni and some are Shia, and that's part of the problem, or maybe all of the problem. I'm not 100% sure, but the situation is that it seems to be getting worse and worse. And I just wanted to bring to your attention, I looked on the internet recently, the amount of different factions that there are fighting in Syria at the moment. You have a whole page here. You have 4 columns, part of which are supporting President Assad. The second one is the Syrian Freedom Movement, and those are fighting against Assad and ISIL, I believe. And then you have the Kurdish Self-Administration and allies. And then the third column is the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant and allies, which is the shortest column. But you can see we have all of these different groups here. Each little dot represents a group. And on top of that, there's another page yet of each column. The one supporting Assad obviously is a little bit shorter here. And you have the countries supporting him: Russia, North Korea, Iraq, Belarus, Egypt, and non-lethal support: Venezuela, Angola, China. And then obviously all these other groups supporting the Syrian opposition and Al-Qaeda network and allies, and then the Kurdish Self-Administration and allies, which USA and England are supporting. England non-lethal support, and USA is obviously supporting with airstrikes. But in addition to this page, these extra pages, you have this continues down yet further for those supporting the where are we? Supporting the Syrian opposition, Al-Qaeda network and allies. So the total of those supporting President Assad are around 36. Those supporting the Syrian opposition and Al-Qaeda, which includes Hamas, is 44. Those supporting the President Assad, it also includes Hezbollah. And then on the Kurdish Self-Administration allies, you have the United States, Qatar, Jordan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Canada, non-lethal support, United Kingdom, and Syrian opposition network. You have Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United States, Libya, France, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, non-lethal support, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany. So you can see, and that totals 44, around 44 for the Syrian opposition, and around 18 or so of the different groups, not including the countries, in the Kurdish Self-Administration, and obviously 3 for the Islamic State. Now, how can there ever possibly be peace brought to bear with so many? It's becoming so discordant, it was going to be impossible. So I think it's a case that we are going to have to think along the lines, learn from past mistakes, both long past and both those that are fairly recent. Long past, I mean, with World War too, because it is a case, and as this MEP brought to the attention over the weekend over a radio programme, it was a case that President Winston Churchill and Russia and the Allies there came together and a peace was agreed, but it wasn't a perfect peace, because obviously the Cold War set in and a lot of the Eastern European countries were actually cordoned off against their will to come under the banner of the Russian flag, and their freedom was not given, which included Poland and various other countries as well. But obviously the Berlin Wall went up as well, and we had a long period where they were not free, and so it wasn't. But there'd been 7 years of war. There'd been a nuclear bomb dropped, I think, that by that time on Japan, and so it had been a great trauma. And obviously they didn't want war to go on, and I think. And it wasn't a perfect peace, and I don't think we can expect a perfect peace now. We have to, and all those involved have to come to realise that it's getting worse the way it is at the moment, and something has to be done along the lines of World War II. Well, a degree of peace must come some way, or even though it's not perfect, and that all peoples are not going to be perfectly receive what they want, because we also have the Islamic State coming up, which everybody seems to be fighting, President Assad and Russia and the Syrian opposition, and obviously even some Hezbollah and Hamas and the Al-Qaeda network is also part of the coalition to fight with those that are fighting in the US and the UK and Canada and that sort of thing. So I think it's a case, again, with learning from recent history. I was in favour of the Iraqi war because I felt Saddam Hussein was a great threat to the world, because he was quite strong with what he was saying about sending out weapons of mass destruction to, I think, the world. I mean, I can't remember his words exactly, but I was fearful that he was going to start doing something like that, regardless of what was provided in order that we could legally go to war. I know there's a great dispute about that, but I, for one, perceived a danger from him before all of that. So I was for the war. Now, since Saddam Hussein has been deposed, so many factions have risen up and they're fighting amongst each other, and now IS, I believe, has come in and it caused even more disorder. So we didn't realise then, or I certainly didn't, that he was actually keeping a lid on all these different fighting factions within Iraq. And the same, I believe, with Yugoslavia and Tito. When Tito died, Yugoslavia broke into great discord. And again, Tito was controlling this discord by force. And there was a degree of peace because of that. So, we don't fully understand this situation, perhaps in the West, because we're not in those countries where there's so much warfare and discord and internal warfare, which we used to have years ago. Even in England, we used to have civil wars at one time, but we've sort of moved away from that and come to a degree of peace. Has Europe, because we used to have more wars in Europe, but now we've come together as a European Union and seek to, by dialogue. So I do think we have to perhaps think along the lines that President Assad is actually a focal point, which some are supporting. He's not perhaps a perfect person that everybody wants, but he has got some degree of peace. There are people supporting him, and Russia is supporting him, and is also wanting to disarm IS, as is President Assad. And I think perhaps if we put forward an aid package, or in conjunction with the other countries that are supporting or involved in this war, but on all sides, if they all come together with some members of some of the factions, you can't have all of them because it would be too many, and that an aid package was put together before they came together to discuss it, for rebuilding Syria, and for a means where the people that are fighting, they can either be paid a certain degree of money to either become part of a free army, or something, a free army against IS or similar, something that's not strictly free army against Syria, but a free army, and they can fight with the Syrian army against IS, and anybody can join that army, be it the Russians or maybe anybody that wants to come along and assist in fighting off IS, and they're paid a wage. That would obviously be a nominal one, or if those who want to come and rebuild, and those in the Syrian armies and Syrian factions that want to be rebuilding Syria, they can also be paid the same amount. So you have people rebuilding and people fighting off IS and trying to secure the borders under the banner of President Assad, and maybe some involvement with the countries that are putting in aid to rebuild Syria, and that there's an international fund for that, which Russia would also be part of, and the Middle Eastern states as well, and then come together and offer this package and have people there also, maybe 6 or 12 or more or less, I don't know, from each refugee camp on the Lebanon, from the Turkish borders maybe, and from those that are still in Syria, but are on the borders, that are on the peaceful part of Syria, because I believe some have run to there for safety. Anyway, from all of the refugee camps. So you may have possibly, if you have 6 or 10 from each camp, so you may have 20 or 30 or people, and then they vote as to whether they want to accept this package and this deal. So, and that perhaps if it's unanimous that the people from the refugee camps want to accept the deal, that should perhaps be opening for further talks with regard to the other factions there that may have been voting against to continue fighting, although obviously we're giving them an option to continue fighting, but against combined force against IS for the moment, and there's a temporary truce against President Assad, so that and there should be some sort of protection for those that are fighting against Assad at the moment, because obviously there's there has to be some maybe some repercussions for them. Obviously that's in the detail of the issue, but I think that surely can be the only way, because otherwise it's going to get worse and worse, and there's going to be greater instability throughout the world. There was a young man also on the radio the other day who was only 13, who's in Syria still, and he's actually built as an architect would, a model of Syria as he sees it when he wants to rebuild it, and it's remarkable. And something very significant he said there as well is that that the people have that they're frightened, the ones that have fled, and they don't want to fight for Syria. And I think it should be also brought to the attention of the world, and perhaps to the refugees that are actually fleeing, although I can understand why they're fleeing. But he has got a point that, even in World War II, my father and all those that fought in the war all had to go to war. I believe they would have been shot or imprisoned or something if they didn't go to war. Certainly might have been shot with desertion, although that might have been in World War I. But certainly they had to go to war. And they either died or survived, and then obviously my father survived, but he did have to go for 4 years to the Middle East, taken from a farming family, hadn't travelled anywhere, and everybody was very brave and had to, they sacrificed a lot, and the refugees and those calling for shame on Europe and that sort of thing, you have to remember that we've also suffered a lot to gain this peace. And it doesn't come by demand and force. And even when you have the peace, you still have to work. My father worked, he was a farmer, and he worked, would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and finish 10 o'clock at night quite often, because that's what farming is, 7 days a week. When the farm was sold, he had another farming associated type job, and he again would be up at 5 in the morning, finish at 8 or 10 o'clock in the evening again, 6.5 days a week. And he did that until he died in 2000. Not until he died. He died in 2004, but he did it until about 1990, I think. He was still working. And even I myself, I've worked. I've not had great accommodation throughout my life. I've been sharing accommodation. I've been just getting by. I've been in debt most of the time. I did finally manage in 2095 to 2004, something like that. I had before then I was sharing accommodation, sharing the bathroom, and then I did manage to. And I had living in accommodation and also doing a second job, and then I had a small little flat that I managed to find because it was cheap enough for me, which had its own shower and WC, but it didn't have cooking facility. It didn't have water that I could drink. I had to have mineral water. It was about 6 by 6 feet in size. And I would sleep in my cupboard, my wardrobe cupboard. It was converted. I would have my clothes above me, and I would sleep underneath the clothes because it was converted with a mattress and that sort of thing. So it hasn't been, it's still not easy. And if we bring all these refugees here, we're not like Germany where they're going to get, maybe, I don't know what they're going to provide, but new spacious homes. And I believe they're giving them €400 a month. I'm not sure what they will get here. They may get something like that, but certainly not more than that. And in any case, we should realise too that Germany is the richest of Europe, and is and I believe they also have a declining, or expect to have a declining population, and want people to come into work. And the youth to support the ageing population. So they are slightly different to the rest of Europe to an extent, because the rest of Europe, their economies are not so great. Certainly Spain, Portugal, Italy to an extent, Greece certainly has had a lot of difficulties. And Hungary is not a rich country. And I don't feel Germany should impose these demands that all of Europe should take people in regardless of what they can afford, because not all can afford what they can afford, and nor can they have the same needs. And obviously some of the countries, I believe Serbia and Croatia and those sort of people, they've had difficulties with the Muslim population anyway. There's been divisions due to that. So that may cause further disorder in their country. So again, you can understand there may be hesitancy on their governments for taking in more refugees. And I do think that with regard to the refugees that we have at the moment, that perhaps administrators should go from the host countries, if some are going to take them, if an agreement is made, that the administrators from the UK or Italy, or sorry, not Italy, from Germany, from any of Poland, if they're going to take some, and France, that they go to Italy and Greece and Hungary in order to issue the refugees that are there now with the documents and the pass cards, in order that they can travel to their country, that they can have be settled into these countries, and that they're not given residency, but they're given temporary visas, or temporary residency for 2 or 3 or 5 years, I don't know, and that they are able to find work or find accommodation with these. If it's a case that there's insufficient accommodation, then we'll have to put up temporary accommodation that won't be as good as the permanent accommodation, because obviously all the Europe is not rich. We haven't got unending money, and and also with these cards, these refugee type identity cards, that they may also apply for jobs worldwide, and that this ID card allows them to travel to internationally when they have a job, if they've been offered a job, and that they then go to that new job and that new country, and then either they can remain there if they apply, and if that country allows them for permanent residency, they stay, or if not, then if the job fails, then they come back and to their original host country. So, and then in addition to this, I think there should be some sort of fund that all of the world again is putting funds into, including the Middle East, because from what I've heard, they're not offering any refugee homes or places for the refugees, which seems rather unfair. The Shias Iran could take the Shias, for instance, and Saudi Arabia and other Sunni countries could take the Sunnis. And I do feel they should reconsider that in these circumstances, because the whole world is changing. We need to move on from wars. We need to grow out of them. And, Europe has managed to grow out of them. And I think it's time now that the Middle East needs to develop and also be assisted by the nations that have come to a degree of peace and prosperity, so that the Middle East can also come to a degree of peace and prosperity, or peace and prosperity, because obviously I believe they had some prosperity before. I think that's possibly the only way that I could possibly think that there's any way forward. I do think too that the media coverage recently with regard to vilifying the Prime Minister in England for not taking more refugees. I think we were going to take 10,000 and he's increased it now to 20,000. And for vilifying Hungary for what they were doing, putting up a wall and this sort of thing. Because it's a very difficult situation, because nobody in the media, when they cover it, they didn't actually speak about the cost of it at all. When they make their interviews, they're saying, yes, but what about austerity? Can we really afford it? It was all about, the plight of the refugees, which was very important. But the whole of Europe will be in a plight if we allow so many in, millions, which may come if we start allowing some in, and then we're all in a difficulty. As I've sometimes said, I think Europe and the peaceful world is a little like the Titanic with the lifeboats. There weren't enough lifeboats, and you have the Titanic, which is sinking, and then the lifeboats, and everybody's trying to climb into the lifeboats, and if everybody climbs in, nobody survives. Everything sinks. So and that, I mean, the world in this instance, and we must learn from what's occurred in the past, both with Saddam Hussein and with World War II, and with Tito after what occurred when he died. So I do think yes, the media coverage has been rather biased and not putting forward the balanced view of what should be done, and maybe focusing too much on making a story. But there was story enough with it. And also it's very important that the media does a very good job, and they do inform us, and they do it very well, and sometimes at great danger to themselves, as we've seen, and we thank them for that. But they do carry a great responsibility, and if it's not a balanced view, as it hasn't now, we put a lot of pressure on governments to do things that are not really possibly the right thing to do too quickly. Now, I think the Prime Minister here has been careful and not bowed to that pressure. He's given a little way, but I think he's doing the right thing about going to the camps and finding out what they want, because I think it's important to find out what they want and also to help them there. But not just help them there, to actually bring a peace, which I believe the USA president is coming for talks this weekend, in September, around the 16th this is. And I hope that Russia and China and all those involved, Saudi Arabia and all the countries and Iran, that they really try and change their mind about the way they do things just a little, so that the world can come together and that everybody can have prosperity and hope. And even the celebrities, they're coming together and saying, oh, it's terrible about the refugees and it's terrible what the government's doing and what Hungary is doing. But again, if it isn't as straightforward as that. And again, celebrities, they can give their homes and their and that sort of thing, which is great. I think that's very right. But it's a case that it's going to be the masses that will suffer the consequences of reduced welfare, no homes, less school places, because we then have to pay for so many people. But obviously the refugees are in a difficult situation, we have to be so careful. Even the celebrities, you have to be careful what you say, because it affects what everybody is thinking, and not everybody has the full knowledge of all the situation, and then we make an incorrect decision. And as I've also recently heard on the radio, when they're bringing out the idea of artificial intelligence, it's the idea is that we don't make very good decisions, the human race, and it's based on the fact that we don't have full knowledge of every area of life. We have a speciality. For instance, I may have a little speciality in the message of God and the Bible and the Quran, not a huge one maybe, but it's been my focus in life. But I don't have a great knowledge of politics and economics, but I have a little. But some have even less than I. They may just vote on a party because their parents did. But they don't fully understand or know the implications or what the theory is behind them. Even I don't fully understand why people vote Labour and people vote Conservative. I can't understand the Labour philosophy at all. It doesn't make sense to me that if you keep giving money to people that are not working, soon the money will run out. But anyway, I'll go into that a little more another time. But I do think that we need to stop vilifying each other throughout the world, and stop vilifying Hungary as well, because they've been it's very difficult. They're on the front line, as it were, with all these refugees there. They're not a rich country. I think the tossing of the food, it can be misunderstood. You have a lot of people pressing forward, and they were giving out the food to them at the front line, and they may have been taking more than their share for, and obviously there were people waiting at the back, so they tossed the food there. It's a logical thing to do, so that the others could get some as well. A little girl came round to one of the soldiers, and he handed it to her. And I think there's, we have to remember there's always two sides to a story. You can't always take the images or what's written as straightforward. You have to really put yourself into that situation. And we have to remember too that Spain has had walls up in their enclaves on the edge of Morocco, I believe, to actually stop migrants coming across there. And they've had them there for maybe 10 years or so. So it's not unusual. They're not the only ones, Hungary, to put up a wall. And as I say, they're in a difficult situation, and nobody's really helping them financially. And Germany has said, we take 800,000, and now they're saying they're not going to take 800,000, and that is created a very a double message, which is confusing everybody to an extent. And obviously Germany has their sovereign right to say what they want or ready to accept, and it was very good of them. But then to impose on the rest of Europe that we have to do the same along the same sort of numbers is not quite a balanced view, I don't think, because again, England has a population of 60 million, as does France, I believe, and Germany around 80 million. But Germany and France have greater land space than England, and so there has to be a degree of understanding there. So, and all these issues are not brought forward or haven't been brought forward when we speak about the refugee situation at all. So I do ask that all the world comes together in a new understanding and a new tolerance so that the whole world can begin to live in peace and prosper, and that there are always two sides to a story, and we must start having empathy or putting ourselves into the positions of all these people, and to stop vilifying or attacking each other, taking the moral high ground, because we are all at fault at times. So I just ask that the whole world and the masses, all of us, which I am also part of the masses, that we start having a new idea, and also to go on www.acertainbattle.com and to read the book A Certain Myth, or Is It True?, which you can read free online on www.acertainmyth.com, which I believe is the one true message of God based on reading the Bible and the Quran, because they all have contradictions in them. And this also, in addition to what I've just speaking now, is key. It's key to bringing the world to peace and understanding, because there are so many divisions, and if there is only one God, there should only be one message from him. So I do ask that you all consider this, and maybe go into on the YouTube messages on acertainbattle.com. You'll see on that page there's a petition you can sign with regard to the message of God and the certain myths. So please consider what I say, and perhaps we can have a new understanding throughout the world and peace for everybody.